Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Good day. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's cyber fraud seminar. In today's session, we will be speaking about avoiding frauds and scams. Thank you for joining. We trust that you'll find today's session informative and useful. My name is Joe Curran. I'm the Managing Director for both the National Deposits Group and the National HOA and Property Management line of business here at BankUnited. I'd just like to remind everybody that you've been placed on listen only for today's session. But if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, please do so in the chat room, and I hope to be able to address it on today's call. Otherwise, certainly feel free to contact us after today's session for further information or assistance. Please allow me to introduce today's speakers and my colleagues. Anna Villarini is the Director of BankUnited's Corporate Fraud Division. Her and her team are the best in the banking business, in my view, on fraud prevention and assisting people when there is a crisis. Anna and her team are very well connected with both local, state, and federal authorities, and they have done a phenomenal job in helping to keep clients' funds safe. In addition to that, Tom Linehan, our Executive Vice President of the BankUnited National Deposit Group, will also be leading today's discussion. So without any further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Anna and Tom. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Tom, are we going to be sharing the deck?
I believe so. I think Christina was going to put the deck up on the screen.
Let's give it a couple of seconds. We definitely have a great turnout today, and we have, there she goes. She's navigating different points of social media.
Okay. Looks like we're in good shape.
Okay, so, definitely everyone always asks, what are the top frauds that are impacting businesses today? And the top ones that are impacting are business email compromises, tech support scams, phishing scams, business scams, ransomware, of course, which is all over the news, data breaches, and check fraud. Even though it's definitely old, check fraud is still something that's extremely prevalent today. So a BEC is a sophisticated scam that's targeting businesses today. And the main thing that they try to do is compromise email accounts. Once they compromise email accounts, the ultimate goal is to trick a victim into thinking that they're receiving an email from a known party, and they provided with payment instructions. So the scam is carried out by compromising the legitimate email account through social engineering or computer intrusion techniques to conduct unauthorized transfers of funds. Now, this is something that's extremely prevalent today across the nation, across the entire world. FBI had reported in 2020 that there were over 19,369 business email compromise complaints for over $1.8 billion in actual losses. As we've indicated here, imagine the average bank robbery was 4,000. Well, the average BEC is 170,000, and you're behind a screen with multiple layers, and it's extremely difficult to catch the actual fraudster. So several complaints have been filed, and this has been a common trend in the industry. Let's move on to the next slide, Christina. There we go. So the most common types of business email compromise scams involve real estate transactions, including buyers, sellers, realtors, title companies. Nobody is immune to this type of fraud. Firms that are offering legal services and import and export companies have also been targeted. So there's different types of scams. You have the bogus invoice scam. Suddenly you receive an email from a vendor. You were already expecting an invoice, but that invoice is coming in from whom you think is your actual vendor or another party, and the payment instructions are fraudulent. Sometimes you have an executive or an employee's email account has been compromised, and it's been used to request the invoice payments to the vendors or to anybody within the same organization. You have the CEO fraud scam. Attackers will pose as the company's CEO or any other executive, and an email is sent to the employees in the finance department requesting a payment. There's also payroll redirection scams. An employer receives an email from whom they think is their employee, asking them to modify payment instructions. and that is done. And that's always dealing with a fraudster. Email accounts have been compromised both on a private sector to the commercial sector. It's happening all across the nation. So this is your side of the world, the real estate industry, which is really who's being targeted because of the amount of money that's coming in and out. So I'm going to hand this over to you. Obviously, we've elaborated a little bit about the different parties involved. We see companies and attorneys and lenders and several of them, but I think it's definitely important for them to be aware of what is happening today.
Thanks, Anna. If we go to the next slide, having supported the title industry now for almost 20 years and talking to folks involved in the real estate world, title, real estate management, we have seen, as Anna alluded to, tremendous growth in business email compromise and the fraudsters' ability to increase not only the per average theft, but certainly the aggregate. As Anna mentioned, the $1.8 billion in actual losses in 2020, that actually grew about significantly year over year, and it's been growing year over year. Just to give you some specs before I go on to these examples, according to the FBI, it took 7 years for them to reach 1 million complaints of cyber fraud. And it basically, and that was in 2007. And by 2021, it only took 14 months to grow another million. So there is no decrease in cyber fraud, and BEC seems to be, as Anna mentioned, the most popular, and it certainly is the most popular when it comes to real estate. What you're looking at here is actual, right from the American Land Title Association, actual cases over the recent years where the actual individuals themselves, not the companies, not the title companies, not the mortgage companies, but individuals themselves that were being scammed through fake emails that they thought they were getting from a trusted counterparty. And as you can see, these 5 examples, it's basically about $5 million in losses. And this is where someone who's anticipating closing on their real estate deal gets an email they think is from their counterparty, their attorney, their title company, and it's not from them, it's from the fraudsters. And they end up giving the wire information or doing an actual wire out to what they think they're doing for their sale or for their purchase to their trusted counterparty. But again, it's going to an account that is controlled by the fraudsters. So again, for everyone on the phone that happens to be in these industries or in other industries, we always ask that you kind of remember that this is going on and try to share it with family, friends, business colleagues, that if they are doing a real estate transaction, to be extra careful when they're ready to wire funds out, to make sure that the banking information that they've received that is accurate and from a trusted counterparty. And we'll get more into that in the program about red flags. We can go to the next slide. Some red flags. So over the years, and as Joe and Anna had mentioned, we've been doing this a long time, and we've seen a lot of different attempted scams out there. So we've kind of put together this page, which is red flags, what you can look for, maybe some hints if you are in a transaction or you're receiving emails that you think are pretending to be part of the transaction. Obviously, what we find is the actual fraudster's email address is very similar to the legitimate one. What they do is they may substitute a digit 1 for the letter L in the email address. So the human nature is we kind of scan through that. We don't really take a hard look at it, right? Obviously, if you hover over the email, the sender's email address, or reply to all, the whole email comes out, that you can check against what you have maybe in your records to ensure that is this from my trusted counterparty. Many companies are putting together email screens that say whether it's from an inside or an outside email address to try to prevent what Anna mentioned before, the internal phishing or email scams. We have obviously multiple sets of wire instructions. One of the biggest red flags in a mortgage transaction or real estate basically is if the method of payment changes in the 11th hour. That is a huge red flag. That is a very typical scam that the fraudsters try to do. If you're providing an official check for the closing and all of a sudden you're getting emails that say, hey, I'm the borrower or I'm the seller. I prefer a wire rather than an official or a cashier's check. Obviously, we've seen poor grammar in many of these emails as we kind of scan them when we do a record of taking a look at how the scam was tried to be put together. A sense of urgency. You know, there was no better industry than as we always say, the real estate industry to try to scam. There's multiple parties. There is a timeline of 90 to 100 days for an average residential closing, which takes 3 to 4 months to put together. Everyone wants the money moved in the next 2 minutes. So if you think about it, you couldn't find a better industry. Using email is the primary way we communicate today, especially over the past 18 months. So really, it's set up perfectly for a fraudster to try to infiltrate. Obviously, a seller contacts the title company via email with payment instruction changes. Obviously, huge, obvious red flag if the payment instructions for a wire change at the last minute. Obviously, we see that the recipient bank account doesn't make sense. What we've seen is in wire instructions, we've actually seen what would be a fake company name within the name of the person who opened up the consumer account. Again, that's not the real title at the bank. That's the title that the fraudster is pretending or sending for the party to try to send the money. Obviously, a payee is presenting themselves as a law firm that's not involved in the transaction. We've also seen emails that to take a look at is, are these coming in under a 24-hour clock or military time versus 12-hour time? Something to see that, hey, wait a minute, I just got this email that says 2300. Well, obviously, you know, here in the States, we use the 12-hour clock, not the 24-hour clock that's done most likely overseas. Obviously, if you get any unsuspected emails, you don't want to open them or click any type of link, because that is literally how malware, which we'll get into a little bit later in the program, is being uploaded onto your computer. Okay, Christina,
Yeah.
go ahead,
Yeah,
Annie. Would you
Tom,
like to add something to that?
yeah,
Before
I wanted to, yeah, definitely. I wanted to add something. So one of the things that it's important to know is that these fraudsters, this is their full-time job. And once they have compromised an email account, they will spend a great deal of time studying those emails, reading those emails, gathering data, finding out who your vendors are, who your lenders are, who your, where your bank accounts are located, who your account officers are, who are the critical parties that you tend to relate to on a daily basis. They will study the emails, they will mimic the writing of the emails, they will mimic invoices, they will spend a large amount of time learning, studying, documenting, mimicking, anything that they can, so that when they are finally going to attempt the fraud, they want to be successful. And their goal is to trick you into generating that payment. And many of them are successful because everybody is so busy on their day-to-day operation, especially real estate companies. If you have, various closings that are transpiring and you're already dealing with numerous parties on a consistent basis, you may not necessarily catch that discrepancy on the email. You may just suddenly see that there's a modification to the wire instructions and you need to do that closing right away and you'll proceed. So it's definitely something to consider, that they will know your behavior.
And before we go on to the next page, I want to thank one of our attendees today, Maurice Israel, who recommended that you should look into M as in Mary, F as in Frank, A as in Apple for email accounts. There are a lot of products being developed out there, both on the email side as well as confirming counterparties. ALTA, the American Land Title Association, the FBI website. Maurice, if you could share that information with our panel today, a little more information, we could share that with our attendees on where to look that up. Yeah. Maurice just chatted MFA/2FA.
Yeah, that's the multi-factor authentication that, just like banks may have it for opening accounts and for verifying other type of activity, there are companies out there and solutions out there that businesses can use to verify emails. So I encourage all of you to do some research. There's other type of prevention and recommendations that we will provide as a whole later on, but definitely being able to authenticate your emails is extremely important. So thank you so much.
Thank you. That was great. Okay, if we go to the next page, we're going to give you an example here of what we find is the typical business email compromise and some of the timeline and why this is so profitable and why it is such a preferred method. And it is the largest and most amount of loss here of all cybercrime. There's about 4 billion, I believe, in 2020 in cybercrime per the FBI website, and almost half of it is business email compromise. So in this case, it's a typical either a seller or someone's refinancing their mortgage. The title company or the client wires $250,000 to the beneficiary bank or the lender to pay off a mortgage. So obviously, everyone thinks everything is done. The person who either is the refinancier or the seller has, doesn't contact their bank. They figure, okay, everything's paid off. But now it's 30 days later, and the client gets a contact that says, hey, your mortgage is 30 days late. We didn't get the payment, and we need, want to know where your $250,000. We did not get the payoff. So how is the scam executed? Well, obviously, what we find is prior to the closing, the client receives a modified closing document, either via email, or in other cases, we'll show some other methodologies like faxes, and think it's from the actual buyer or the seller or the borrower. The fraudster impersonating the borrower indicates that the lender was going to be sending a fax, a modified CD, as a result of a payoff error. They also claim the payoff amount will remain the same, but it's just basically there was a payoff error. This information gets put in the file, and then when the closing happens, they go to the most recent information, the title company or settlement company or attorney, and the wire is processed with the new instructions sent to a bank account controlled by the fraudster. And again, as I mentioned, after 30 days, the lender contacts those folks out there to say, hey, we never received payment for Mr. Linehan's mortgage. Obviously, now why it's so great, it's 30 days later. Nobody was made aware of anything until 30 days, which gave the fraudsters plenty of time to work with their mule account or the account that they're controlling to either and we've seen this actually go into a bank, get a bank check which is cash for maybe a portion of that amount that doesn't create any concern or any distractions there, or they will forward the money to an account that they control overseas, which almost makes it impossible for us to get the money back. So again, the things to look at, where did we see? We saw a last minute or 11th hour change in the payoff information, whether it was the banking, the amount, the person's name, but certainly the banking information changed in this case. Okay, Christine, if we go to one more slide. So as I mentioned before, some clients are actually going back to faxing. We're actually going back to the future, feeling, well, if I don't use email, I'm safe. Well, obviously, we saw an example where the title settlement agent had a file 2 weeks before the closing. The seller or the person refinancing sent a fax to the title company that said, I got this from my bank. Here's my payoff information. Again, 2 days prior to the closing, the settlement company received an updated fax, which they believed was from the seller saying, this is an updated payoff letter, and they stuffed it in the file. Sure enough, the closing commenced, and the settlement company ended up wiring $390,000 as a payoff for the seller's mortgage, but it was to a bank account that was controlled by the fraudsters. How did this all happen? Well, through business email compromise, the fraudsters compromised the seller's email account, and they just followed the communication between the settlement company, the lender, and the seller. They gained access to the original payoff letter that the seller received from the lender, and then created an exact duplicate of the original letter and faxed it as they did, just changing the banking information over to the settlement company. So even going back old school, going to faxing, the common link in this obviously was the email account that were involved, getting that information. It doesn't matter how the bad guys send the bad information, it's basically the way that they receive it, and that's obviously through the business email compromise. Luckily enough, this was caught in time, and full restitution was made to the settlement company. The fraudsters didn't win on this one. Okay, if we can go one more page here. Okay, what to do if and when a business email compromise And I'm going to also, after I speak, I'll ask my colleague Anna to add a few of her thoughts. I think of all the slides that we have in this presentation, I would say this one is the one that I would copy and post in every one of your employees' offices, and make sure every employee that is involved in the disbursement of funds has this to know what to do. Just like you would have a continuation of business, as we all had over the last 18 months for COVID, you should have one if and when this happens. And again, you don't have to only be in a real estate related industry to have this affect you. So obviously the first thing we have folks to go is, first of all, know who your banking team is. Know exactly who your representatives are. Who do you work with? Who are their support folks from an operations perspective? Know their telephone numbers, email addresses, group email addresses. And then if this unfortunately happens, you want to inform your banking team that you believe that you may have sent a wire, it's involved in a fraudulent transaction. At that point, if you can provide a screenshot of that outbound wire, that helps, because that gives us as the bank that we can work with, let's say Anna and her team, to work with the beneficiary bank to see if there's a way that we can get those funds and see where we are in the process. Obviously, we'll request that a wire recall be done. The wire recall is the standardized process. We'll inform the beneficiary bank this could be involved in a fraud. We'll work together with the beneficiary bank to try to see, again, if we can get any type of recovery for our client. We want to gather all the information associated with this and provide our banks. We will provide, let's say in our case, we'd provide Anna and her team. We also encourage our clients to go to the FBI site. That's the Internet Complaint, our IC3 site. That is actually, you can put your complaint there, but it's also an incredible website to find out more information about this. And then obviously working together with you, the client, the beneficiary bank, our team, Anna's team, we do whatever we can to try to successfully recover these funds, that we can try to get it back to you. And I'll give you a few words, because I know you're very passionate about this as well.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. So yes, you've covered a lot of important points, and that is the minute that you feel that you are, because the victim is a victim of a business email compromise, the clock is ticking. It's extremely important to contact the financial institution, let them know immediately what it is that has transpired, so that the bank can proceed with doing what they need to do to assist in some sense of recovery. Sometimes if the red flags weren't there at the time of receiving the fraudulent emails and wire instructions, there's also something else that sticks out. And that is that if you ever find out, you get an email from your financial institution or a phone call that says that the wire that you sent out was returned, or that there's questions regarding that wire because perhaps the name doesn't match the bank account. If there's any discrepancy that transpires when you have originated a wire, we encourage you to dig a little bit more. There's always a reason why something happens. There's always a reason why the other financial institution may return that wire. Perhaps there's no account over there at the other financial institution. Maybe they identified that the account on their side and the names don't match. Maybe they've identified that the account on the other side is a new account, has several red flags, and they're pretty much giving you a warning that they're not comfortable with the receipt of this wire. So I would encourage everyone to question the type of activity that transpires after the fact. You may be getting a call from a financial institution saying, the other bank is asking us a little bit more questions regarding the beneficiary. Consider that a red flag. Do a little bit of digging. But in the interim, everything that is required here when there are victims is time. Hurry up and contact the financial institution, gather all the information you have. At BankUnited, we do everything we can to provide guidance, guide the victim through the process. We understand that it's a very emotional, concerning time because it's a lot of money and no one wants to feel victim to a fraud, but we're here to provide that guidance. So here we have all of the different examples that we have for defending against business email compromises. I know that some of it may seem self-explanatory, but it's critical, and I am going to go through a majority of them because I definitely want you to make note. Businesses are encouraged to enhance their employee fraud awareness, educate your employees in all of the different types of fraud so that they can put things into perspective. Let them know that this is extremely common, that if they ever receive an email, question that email, be cautious. Carefully scrutinize all of the emails, especially unsolicited or irregular emails that are sent by high-level executives, as they can be used to trick employees. Unsolicited emails would be that there's absolutely no reason why suddenly you're getting this email. This person never contacts you and sends you an email. Verify any changes in vendor payment instructions by using a secondary sign-off. Stay updated on your customers' habits, including their details and the reason behind their payments, and conduct callbacks on all payment requests. 99.9% of the business email compromises. And the only reason why I don't say 100 is that I don't want somebody quoting me and saying, well, Anna said it was 100. So 99.9 of these business email compromises could have been prevented had the victim contacted the other party at their numbers on file, not a number on an email, but the numbers on file to verify those instructions. That is a lot of money that could have been prevented. Prohibit access to personal emails from business computers. Personal emails tend to be known for receiving spam and containing potential malware. Encourage the employees to only use business computers for business use. Refrain from visiting sites, from Googling, from shopping. Conduct thorough verification of new business clients. Use caution with clients who only want to communicate via email and the WhatsApp application. There's so much social media outlets out there that you can be contacted, but those have become a huge target. Segregate employee job duties just to avoid collusion. Secure your business network security and email accounts. And if you have any reason to believe that you are a victim of a business email compromise, you need to contact your financial institution and report the incident to the FBI and the local police department. It's extremely important. I would also print this slide or make note on this slide or take a screenshot because that's extremely important. So next we've definitely pushed really hard on business email compromises because it's huge and it's impacting so many. But that's not the only scam, unfortunately. You have the tech support scams. These are pop-ups that you would receive on your computer screen or a phone call from someone that's claiming to be from Microsoft or your IT department. That's happening because of the fact that people are working remote. We're also seeing people being targeted by someone claiming to be from Amazon or from Apple. They will ask for remote access to the computer and that they need to install an application. They can install an upgrade or a computer protection, whatever the scam may be. They need access to the computer. Once they obtain access to the computer, you have given them the keys to the kingdom. There's also phishing and smishing scams. These are scammers that are sending emails, which is what phishing is, or text messages, which is smishing, to lure you into clicking on a link or downloading an attachment that will result in the infection of the device. It'll put a malware on the device. Its main purpose is to obtain personal and business financial information. Business scams, it's solicited by a scammer via email requesting the business's services with the intent to commit fraud. We are seeing these a lot through social media. Depending on the type of businesses out there, suddenly someone is reaching out to you through the WhatsApp application, through Facebook, through perhaps other type of group organization, social media outlets, and they're telling you they want to do business with you. But everything is done via email. Everything is done via virtual. Even passports are being provided that are counterfeit, that you're going to be thinking that you actually have done your due diligence. But all of this is a business scam. And I truly say that if something doesn't sound right, it isn't right. In many cases, wires are involved. The wire would have been received from a compromised account. Sometimes the party may receive a check in the mail as part of the business deal, and those checks are being returned as counterfeits. So the type of scam all depends on the type of business. Ransomware. By now, I think a lot of people are doing research and trying to figure out exactly what a ransomware attack is because they're seeing it on the news. And the minute it targeted gas, everyone kind of panicked. Ransomware is a type of malicious software. It is designed to block access to a computer system until a sum of money is paid. Ransomware targets both human and technical weaknesses in organizations and individual networks to deny the availability of the critical data. Malicious cyber actors are using virtual currency, such as Bitcoin, to facilitate their crime. And the most common way to infect a machine or network is through clicking on malicious phishing email links and visiting infected websites. A ransomware attack can shut down your business in a heartbeat. And I
Yeah,
think
and I
we
will
all
add,
know-
Anna, that
Yeah.
according to the FBI, ransomware is probably the fastest growing scam. I mean, we've all obviously read in the media the latest, as you mentioned, scams that ransomware scams that have been done. Just for some perspective, back in 2018, there was about $3.6 million in reported losses for ransomware. So that's basically 2-3 years ago, and as up to 2020, it was up to 30 million, which I'm sure as we're in the mid part of 2021, I'm sure that number is dwarfed again. So how does this all start? Where does it all begin? One of the biggest tools that these fraudsters use, not only for ransom, but for many of these scams to gain access or to gain a visual look, is through malware. I'm probably the least technical person on the phone, but what malware or malicious software is again, is a program design that you unexpectedly load onto your computer, and that gives the bad guys access through either managing or watching keystrokes or getting access to your email account. If they get access to your email account and you're involved in a real estate transaction, they obviously can now see the communication between you and your counterparties. Again, that's how they get plugged in to the real estate transaction. That's how they watch the real estate transaction, working with folks in the industry who have experienced this and have done deep dives. They've seen where the fraudsters have watched a transaction for 90 to 120 days, just sat and waited until they saw the closing date that was set. And then that's when they pounce. So the key is, as Anna mentioned, you want to try to keep employees off the web or off websites that that they don't need to be on, no access to their own email accounts. You want to keep the I guess odds of getting malware onto your system as low as possible. But if you do have it, what we found is obviously you have a computer that's running very slowly. If there's an online banking and you're getting continuous repeats for passwords. One of the oldest scams that we saw many years ago was the fake logon page for a bank's website. Unsuspecting victims that had malware uploaded on their screens gave the bad guys the ability to see the links to the banking sites, where they literally would create a sign-on page that looked exactly, almost to the color of the bank's logon page. They changed the URL, so the unsuspecting victim, when hitting the link, would think they were going to the bank sign-on, but they were really on a dead blank page. Because they knew that this page got a hit, the bad guys were actually chatting, pretending to be the bank, saying, hey, we're having some problems. What can we do for you? And an unsuspecting person said, hey, I'm trying to log on. I have to do a wire. And they said, well, we can handle that. So literally would scam or social engineer someone for giving them their ID and password. So while the person's thinking they're on with the bank, the bad guys are actually on the real website now, getting the credentials from someone and actually moving money out. So certainly one thing we will tell you is BankUnited will never, ever, our online team will never chat when your employees are working on a chat, right? If you suspect anything, back to that page we talked about, call the banking team, say something doesn't look right. Now, sometimes we say go with your gut. If it doesn't look right, give us a call, give the team a call, say, hey, this isn't looking right for me. My team's trying to log on. Something is unusual here on the online system. So we can kind of do a deep dive and see, if something's going on. So obviously, as we said before, if just like a BEC, hey, if you think you may have malware or some sort of virus, stop everything. You have IT professionals that you may deal with. Make sure you're engaging them to make sure that they can take a look and make sure that you have a system that's clean. Because obviously, if you can keep people off of websites they shouldn't be on, if you can keep your business system safe, it's a better day. You're going to limit the chances of getting ransomware, going to limit the chances of getting malware that's going to lead to perhaps business email compromises. Hey, Tom, it's Joe. Just We've gotten some questions here from today's participants, and if you don't mind, prior to getting into the next topic, which is check fraud, one of the questions that's come up is regarding third-party solutions for verifying wire transfer information. There are companies that are out there that provide the software and confirmation on wire transfers and monitoring. Can you make some comments for everyone on those companies and the value that they can provide in helping to protect the assets here, in this case, the funds in an account?
Sure. And then I'll defer to Anna for some comments. Yeah, there is no silver bullet. I can say that. There is no one solution for preventing any of this from happening, right? It's really a combined effort, right? It's what we talk about today: education, being safe. One of the participants mentioned a company called Certified. Joe and I know Certified extremely well. We saw the original demonstrations of Certified many years ago. I think it's an incredibly good arrow to have in your quiver to help verify who is on the other line of this message. But there, again, I'm not aware of one particular software or solution that is going to say, hey, if I get this, I'm 100% safe. Because remember, business email compromise isn't really that technical. I mean, it's way far technical than I am, but it really is designed on social media. If we all remember, I think the moment we signed up for AOL 25 years ago, we got the first Nigerian prince email, all right, that said, hey, I need to place some money. So, I think business email compromise or phishing is as old as email itself. But certainly if any of the participants have any of these solutions that they'd like to share with the panel, please do, because what we do is we try to share this information with our customers, our contacts, folks who don't even bank here, because the only way we're going to stop this or to try to slow it down is through education and all working together to try to make it harder for the bad guys to do their craft. It's kind of like they always say the home alarm systems, when you have the sign out front is almost as effective as the actual home alarm system itself, right? Because the burglar, if he sees it or she sees it, is going to maybe move on to the next house that doesn't necessarily have the sign. Anna, I know you have some thoughts on that.
No, I mean, it was more about, I definitely don't like recommending any type of vendor because, again, we don't have the guarantee. So I encourage you to visit and, discuss this with some of your peers. Or if you're a title company, reach out to your other title companies. Attorneys, reach out to the other attorneys. Definitely, I'm sure that, Googling for certain types of cyber protection, wire transfer fraud, email confirmations, authentications, multi-factor authentications. There are many vendors out there. I encourage you to take a look at several ones that you may come across. Certified we may do business with, but I think the key with wire transfers is simply changing your processes. As I mentioned, it was as simple as doing callbacks upon any type of payment instruction. So that's how simple it would have been. I would be definitely looking for vendors that will do email authentications, that will generate an alert or provide you some type of a red flag if there's a discrepancy. But again, it can also be very old school, right-clicking on the top of the browser to be able to distinguish, is it in fact coming from that legitimate email? Looking at the entire body of the communication and the situation in its totality is what's really going to be able to give you a better idea of it's fraud or it's not fraud.
Thank you, Tom and Anna, for allowing me to interrupt to get that question out from a participant. And I know we only have a few more topics for discussion. Tom, if we could also, just for a moment, remind the participants that the fraudsters are going back to old school and using faxes as a way of fraud. So I want to bring it up because everybody in this day and age of technology who may not use a fax machine or a fax as a form of communication or confirmation, be aware what's old is new again. And Tom, if you could just take a minute to note how the scam works via fax, I think it would be something that's relevant if and when a fax is used in the communication for the transfer or movement of funds and what to look out for.
Yeah, Joe, I know you were having a little technical difficulty getting back on, but we covered that. But I'll reemphasize that again, faxes are great. It keeps the communication between both parties kind of private. But again, when the information that is going to be shared over that fax was gained via email, you're not really taking out the risk, right? Because it's really the delivering of the fraudulent information via email that is really what causes it, irrespective of how it gets to the final party. So Joe, you make a great point, just to reemphasize it. Faxes are good, but they're only as good as the email. And as Anna said, the callback, the verification. And you know, again, we had a client that actually thwarted a scam, but certainly had no idea, because again, they're going to try anything. And, you know, I'll add on Anna's point about prevention and using what's out there. You know, we actually have one of your peers in the industry. They literally tell clients, we will never, and give it to them in writing, we will never email you banking information. So this way, if the individual ever gets an email that is supposed to be from the law firm, they know right away it might not be legitimate, because they say, look, if you ever get an email that you think's from us, call us at this number, not the email, because they'll call the number in the email, and the fraudsters are getting bolder and bolder. They'll represent themselves as that law firm, and if you've never spoken to anyone at the law firm, how do you know you're not speaking to someone at the law firm? Again,
Yeah.
if you see it's all social engineering. Go ahead, Anna.
Yeah, one of the things that I've seen is that, you know, many title companies, and I say title companies because it's the core of what we're seeing, they have these messages on the bottom of their email that says, you know, fraud prevention, where we conduct callbacks, and it gives you a disclosure that they know and they're aware of what's happening. But what's happening is that within the companies and themselves, you've got employees that are not necessarily following their internal procedures. So it's putting a lot of these businesses in a very, you know, tough predicament. Their own employees need to follow the rules. And that means enhancing training. That means ensuring that if you have new hires, this is part of their training from the very beginning. Your employees can make you or break you. And if they're not following protocol, it can definitely put the business in a situation where there's a loss of money. I also want to add that there's this misconception that iPhones are not vulnerable to malware, and that is not the case. It's like an old myth. I remember when people said, no, you're protected with your iPhone because it has the best security measure. Okay, that's no longer the case, especially if you accidentally give someone access to your iPhone. If you load an application that is infected or meant to be able to take over, you click an email from your iPhone. So I think it's very important for everyone to understand that it is extremely easy to fall victim now if we're not cautious on any device that we may have, even getting a phone call.
So we just have several topics left, and one of which in the next section we're going to talk about is check fraud. Anna, I'll turn it over to you for the details. And obviously people are limiting the number of checks they're writing today in today's environment, but please be aware there still is check fraud out there.
Absolutely. You know, when you start looking at financial institutions and they start indicating what are the top fraud losses that many times banks have, they're still seeing check fraud on the top. So you've got, you know, plastic card fraud, obviously, the check fraud is still transpiring. You've got the main issue that we're seeing with check fraud in the industry are counterfeit checks. So you've got counterfeit checks, which are fake checks that are created. It has the customer's routing number, an account number. Sometimes you have an account number that doesn't even match the maker. And this happens. This happens especially with business accounts that have numerous checks circulating. It's very easy for a fraudster to come across a check and make a fake one. We also see altered checks. You know, legitimate checks are being intercepted and they're being altered. This tends to happen mainly with mail compromises. So, you know, if you're putting your mail in the front of the house or in the front of the business, we see that fraudsters are hacking into all types of mailboxes. They're even, phishing and putting a device into the US postal big blue bins and phishing mail out. And once they fish it out, all they have to do is alter the information on that item and intercept it. We're also seeing forgeries. The maker's signature has been forged. And most of the time, this is associated with stolen checks and altered checks. So this is still impacting businesses today. And I think there's a misconception. Everyone thinks that if they are a victim to check fraud, the bank is going to pay me back and I'm not going to incur a loss. That's not the case. In reality, the bank has no control on whether or not the check was originally issued to one payee and the fraudster intercepted it and altered it to another payee. So it's extremely important that everyone is reviewing their bank statements. You're going to see later on, I'm going to mention that there are services that every financial institution should be offering. I know BankUnited does, such as Positive Pay Payee for checks and for ACH. This allows the customer to view the file on a daily basis, and anything that does not match their file will generate an exception to allow them to review, and they can determine whether they want to pay the item or return it. I highly encourage that for businesses who have a lot of checks flowing through. It is extremely painful to be a victim to check fraud. And although the banks will assist in trying to recover, it's a process. It's also a lengthy process. It can take another financial institution up to 90 days to even respond. So we want to make sure that everyone is aware that check fraud is still prevalent today.
Hey, Ann, if I could add, the industries where you provide the general public with a check, and let's face it, I think title settlement is probably the poster child for that. That immediately puts your bank information into the public domain, right? What's on a check? The routing number of the bank, your account number at the bank, and your signature on that check. Where that check goes, you have no control over. And as Anna mentioned, tools like Payee Positive Pay provide you, the client, with the ability to at least have a fighter's chance that if that check got altered or that check got copied, or with software, as Anna mentioned, now we can replicate and make hundreds of these checks and feather them out to see if any of these can get paid. It gives you that line of defense that you can go and say, hey, I didn't write this check number 101 for Linehan. I'm returning it. So we encourage you, talk to your bankers, talk to your treasury specialists, learn more about this service. Fighting fraud it's a team sport, and it's really not 100% that the bank can prevent it, and we know it's not 100% that our clients can prevent it. But together, working together with the tools, with the relationship management you have, the support you have, is a great way to help fight this. And as Anna mentioned, we have such a focus on cyber fraud that, check fraud grows and is growing and continues to. I don't think we'll ever be a paperless society, as they say. So we always have to keep our eye not only on a technical and email and systems fraud, we always have to be fighting check fraud every day. And if you write checks and pay them out to individuals, it's worth every moment of your time to look into things like Positive Pay and making sure that you're using, maybe watermarks on your checks, things like that are being developed that can help you fight it. Thanks, Anna.
Or even at this point is, where are you dropping off your mail? I don't want to come out on record now on social media saying don't put your bills, your checks out in the front of the mailbox. But honestly, as a regular civilian, I don't want to put anything out in the personal mailbox, because that's happening, especially in South Florida, where they're targeting mail. Come up with a plan that's a little bit more secure than just dropping it off at a mailbox. Even some of these are getting compromised that have multiple boxes together. So try to come up with a better plan to be able to drop off the mail so it doesn't get intercepted. And it may not even happen at your business, but it may happen at wherever it is that you're sending that payment. So here we are at the very end, which is, how do we prevent this from happening? How do we prevent fraud? And I'm putting a lot of different bullets. I've repeated them throughout the presentation. We all have. The key thing is employee awareness. If I have a business, I need to make sure that my employees are fully trained and educated on all of the different things that are transpiring in the world today. What can they do to protect us? And I think that's very important. I mentioned different things such as ensuring the employees are familiar with fraud, prohibit access to personal emails. We mentioned that use isolated device for banking transactions. Conducting callbacks is always going to be my number one. Make sure you're calling back on every payment instruction modification and don't call back the number on the email. If you receive an email from a fraudster, chances are that number on the email is what you're going to be calling and you're going to be speaking to the fraudster. So it's extremely important. Consider the banking services, such as the ones I mentioned, Positive Pay, Payee, whatever other financial institution you may have, and they offer. Obviously, we encourage you, through BankUnited, use strong passwords with various different characters, shred important documents, ensure that you have segregation of duties, and definitely develop a plan of action for your business if you do experience any type of fraud. Recognize that this can happen to anyone. We do encourage you to consider cyber insurance. There definitely are a variety of different types of insurance, but in case you fall victim, you may need some coverage. And some of these insurance companies, it's not just about reimbursing you for your loss. Some of them may offer you some additional assistance. They may provide guidance on, they may have their own contacts with law enforcement to assist in recovery, but also to document and follow the process. You want to make sure that you have everything documented.
Yeah, we had a question from a participant, Anna, on the subject of insurance coverage for cyber.
I think it's more the question there's basically, it's a statement that they encourage businesses to offer cybersecurity training to their employees. Absolutely. You want to be able to provide as much training as you can. Provide the training that, maybe even doing testing, phishing emails, ensuring that your employees are scrutinizing those emails, guiding them on all of the different things that could be done. Cybersecurity training is something that many commercial clients are offering in-house. That's something that's extremely important. The industry is doing that as well. As you can see, you're going to see it all over social media when it comes to law enforcement. They are definitely trying to keep the public informed on cybercrime.
Yeah, and Joe, I'll add on the cyber insurance and talking to clients. They ensure that they're speaking to their agent regarding what is covered under a cyber insurance policy. Is it just technical? Does email compromise, is that covered? Because let's remember, if you get bad information and you go online and you set up the wire and send it, there was no systems breach, right? This came in because you got bad information. So again, important to know if email compromise is covered, and also important to know what is the deductible and what is your responsibility in that email compromise portion versus what an insurance company would pay. With the type of exponential growth in losses, you'd have to think from an insurance company perspective, I'd have to think the premiums as well as the deductibles might have increased over the last few years with business email compromise growing in the rapid pace that it is. But certainly encouraged to speak to your agent, speak to what is covered, what is not, and certainly get a better understanding or a good understanding of what is the financial responsibility of your firm should unfortunately you become a victim.
Absolutely. I think definitely commercial clients should be investing in network security, on any type of cybersecurity, employee training. Times are not going to get any better when it comes to fraud. It's only going to become more advanced. Fraudsters are way ahead of us and we're all trying to catch up. We definitely encourage all commercial clients to truly invest and take fraud and security seriously.
The time to understand what your insurance coverage is and the policy says is not after an event. It's prior to an event. So please do make sure you understand the policy and what you're getting for the premium you're paying, because many times there's a huge disconnect between the insurance company and the insured understanding what your responsibility is and what the insurance company's is. So we're just about out of time. And I'd like to thank both Tom and Anna for today's update, and thank you, all of you for joining. We here at BankUnited take your safety, security, as well as that of your counterparties quite seriously. We're so thrilled that you were able to spend an hour of time with us, and it is certainly our hope that today was informative and that there's some takeaway that perhaps you could share with your friends or colleagues. And certainly, we encourage you to reach out as needed. We'd be thrilled to talk with you separately, you or your teams. I know that Tom and Anna do this type of fraud seminar quite frequently. And if there's a need for us to provide an opportunity to talk with your collective company and the resources and the folks there, we're glad to do so. I'd like to thank Donna Butler from our marketing department for helping to organize today's call. And I wish you all a fantastic, great afternoon. And thank you very much for joining.